Coming up, on Thursday this week, the Bank of England's Deputy Governor Ben Broadbent said, "The hits to Britain's economy from Brexit are probably appearing faster than expected. We've not changed our estimate of the long-run effects, but we've brought some of them forward. We think probably they're coming in faster than we first expected." Now, this is not some dyed-in-the-wool Remoaner. This is not somebody with a political axe to grind. This, Brexitists, is not some traitor talking his country down. This is someone whose whole raison d'etre, that means reason for being if there are any Brexiters watching, is to make the best possible expert decisions for the good of the British economy. And just to make clear exactly where Mr Broadbent of the Bank of England is coming from, he adds, "Brexit has been something that has pulled down potential output in our country, in our assessment, for many years." In this video, we'll be looking at the state of play on the 3rd anniversary of Brexit, including the state of what's now known as the country's Brexit, surprising promises from the European Union that the door remains open for the UK to rejoin, the latest constituency-level polling on Brexit, the worsening labour shortages caused by leaving the single market, the chaotic retained EU law bill, and why our politicians are not being honest about the disaster of Brexit. Stay tuned. If you enjoy watching the Truth to Power channel, I'd really appreciate it if you'd help me out by hitting the like button and especially by sharing a link to this video on your social media platforms. So this week saw a number of anniversaries. 3 years of political chaos and economic decline. 50 years since the UK joined the European community. And 10 years since the pig fancier David Cameron pledged a referendum to try to end the civil war in the Tory party and kill off the threat from the racist UKIP party. David Cameron's own description of UKIP, by the way, alongside his chosen adjectives of fruitcakes and loonies. The trouble is, a lot of those UKIPers are now fully paid up members of the Tory party, and many of them actually sit in Parliament. And to this day, they're still arguing that where this hardest of hard Brexits has gone wrong is that it hasn't been hard enough. A desperate piece of wrong-headed thinking, akin to that of Truss supporters who say that her tax-cutting fiscal event went wrong only because of a matter of timing. The cognitive dissonance of still believing Brexit is fantastic, but that belief being contradicted by every observable fact. The human brain finds it uncomfortable to hold these two contradictory thoughts at once, and the brain is forced to accept either 1, that you were wrong in your belief, or 2, that there must be some other reason why the observable facts don't contradict your belief. And this is what leads to all the weird excuses from the Brexitists. The Brexit wasn't hard enough. The politicians delivering Brexit were all Remainers and didn't believe in Brexit enough. The European Union has somehow managed to sabotage plucky Britain's desire to be free. It's the Remoaners, they're traitors who have talked the country down and prevented Brexit from working. It was COVID. Without COVID, we'd be the world's strongest economy right now. It's the war in Ukraine. For some reason, it's affected the UK economy the most. It's the fault of the immigrants living in 5-star hotels, driving around in Bentleys and wearing Prada. We never said Brexit was about the economy. They did. We never said it would be easy. They did. We never said the benefits would be immediate. They did. At least we had the fastest vaccine rollout in the world. Yes, and we were still operating under EU rules at that time. A fact that Johnson, Truss, Gove and most recently Sunak have continually lied about. It had nothing to do with Brexit.
Does the fact that the UK is no longer part of the EU, did that make any difference to the speed with which you were able to complete the authorisation?
We have been able to authorise the supply of this vaccine using provisions under European law which exist until the 1st of January.
It had nothing to do with Brexit. Oh, and best of all, Brexit hasn't happened yet. Apparently. I mean, wow, it must all have been a dream I had. When is Bobby Ewing stepping out of the shower, I wonder? The biggest achievement of Brexit was to turn the young against the old, the cities against the towns and countryside, Remain voting Scotland against the Union, and in Wales to turn Remain voting Welsh speakers against their Brexity English-speaking compatriots. It's also turned those with qualifications against those without. But there appears to be no immediate end to Brexit, with Labour running scared that by revisiting the Brexit question, they'll be handing ammunition to the Tories at the next election to distract from the corruption, the cost of living, the failing economy and the near total collapse of public services across the board. Meanwhile, there is now a clear majority in the UK, a combination of so-called Remoaners and a growing army of Brexiteers that wishes to reverse Brexit. If a referendum on rejoining were called tomorrow, the polls predict a likely 14% margin in favour of taking steps to rejoin. But neither of the main parties appear to be ready to recognise this new will of the people, to coin a phrase, despite assurances from senior EU sources this week that, despite all the insults hurled at them by the likes of Farage, Truss and the ignoramus David Frost, the door is still open. This overtly friendly message from the EU's chief Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, in combination with the polls showing an overwhelmingly pro-EU majority within the UK electorate, is now spooking the misleaders of the Brexit project. Daniel Hannan, the ex-MEP and liar-in-chief for the Brexit disinformation campaign, was quoted in the Daily Telegraph as saying, "There really does seem to be a plot to overturn Brexit. For their plan to have the slightest chance of success, they need to convince the country that Brexit has been an economic disaster." Sorry to break it to you, Daniel, but the International Monetary Fund said this week, the UK economy will shrink and perform worse than other advanced economies, including Russia, as the cost of living continues to hit households. Now, every other country is affected by the same global factors as Britain, but only we have the Brexit. That's the only reason why we're performing worse, and also why food prices have jumped by 6%, and also why our economy has shrunk by 4% compared to projections of the UK within the EU. Even Jeremy Warner, the associate editor of the Brexity Daily Torygraph, admits that trade with our European neighbours is faltering badly due to Brexit, with the rather awkward fact that the UK is the only G7 economy yet to recover to its pre-pandemic size. The grim reality is that the country seems to be falling apart on almost every front. And it's not just the Torygraph. Only 1 in 5 Brits think Brexit is going well. The breakneck descent from being the unopposable will of the people to becoming an irrelevant cult. And yes, that might well be a spelling mistake. Meanwhile, Brussels' former chief Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier said this week that the door on the EU side will remain open any time. It is not for me to give advice to say you have to join or not to join. It will be your choice, the choice of your leaders, the choice of your MPs. It will be your choice and your sovereign choice. Everybody knows the conditions. Mr Barnier added, "There is a certain number of challenges we can only face together. Even if your country is now outside of the EU, we must cooperate to exist." I must say, I was shocked to hear these words from a senior EU spokesperson after all the vitriol hurled at him by the Brexit misleaders over the years. It gives you some hope that if we could ever get our political masters to admit that Brexit has been a disaster, that there may be a way back at some point sooner than we may have thought. For now, though, it's a matter of waiting for a new generation of politicians to outline an honest, logical and practical route out of this post-Brexit catastrophe. Current politicians who can see the tragedy clearly seem to be too afraid to speak out. The Tory party has been completely taken over by swivel-eyed hard Brexitists, while Labour seems to be scared stiff of its own tail, the largely Brexit-voting red wall voters, who the polls tell us are actually the voters who have most changed their minds on Brexit, and that Labour shouldn't be afraid of any backlash from the red wall should they reopen the Brexit debate. This week, the polling organisation Unheard published a survey based on a statistical technique that involved constituency-level responses to questions including Brexit. Respondents were asked whether they agreed or disagreed with the statement, "Britain was wrong to leave the EU." The results from each of the 632 constituencies suggest the country has dramatically changed its views since 2019. In every constituency in the country, except 3, more people agree with the statement than disagree. That is, they overwhelmingly tend to think that Brexit was a mistake. The only 3 still taking the blue pill are all located in Lincolnshire, and only Boston has more people disagreeing than agreeing. It is the only place in the country which doesn't feel regretful about Brexit. You can see these results plotted out on this map with the little area of pink and red showing the least regretful areas. What's really interesting, going back to the red wall voters, is that enthusiasm for Brexit has faded far more dramatically among left-leaning areas with higher Labour support, than in the Tory heartlands. In other words, those few still in favour of Brexit are overwhelmingly Tory voters anyway. By comparing the percentage of those who still support Brexit with the percentage who voted for Brexit in 2016, you can see in this table of the top 20 constituencies which have had the most significant change of heart over the past 6 years, all but 2 are Labour seats. Wake up, Keir Starmer, and realise that you can tell the truth about Brexit without hemorrhaging support for the Labour Party, and perhaps even winning over any sensible Tories and centrists looking for an escape from this swivel-eyed UKIP governing party. There's a shortfall of 330,000 workers due to Brexit, and immigration from non-EU countries has failed to take up the slack after freedom of movement ended. Last month, a cross-party group of peers in the House of Lords warned that the UK's shrinking labour force and soaring number of job vacancies was putting the economy at risk of weaker growth and persistently higher inflation. Factors behind the trend include loss of freedom of movement, which has led to large shortfalls in key sectors of the economy. And until those in power admit that it's Brexit that has caused that problem, then how on earth can we start to find a solution? Well, the answer is we can't. In fact, things are set to get a whole lot worse before they get better, with the Tories' new Retained EU Law bill, which, if passed, will be a bonfire of civil and employment rights. It aims to review, revoke or replicate over 4,000 pieces of legislation passed by Parliament while the UK was a member of the European Union, without Parliament having any further say. The bill proposes a sunset clause, which would see all retained EU laws automatically scrapped by the end of the year unless they are replicated by the government. Experts have warned that important rights, protections and standards could all be scrapped, including things like workers' rights, paid leave, sick leave, maximum working hours. Environmental protections like the control of industrial waste, ensuring clean water and protecting animals. Food standards, ensuring food in the UK is safe to eat. And safety regulations, ensuring employers cannot put workers in danger, and which includes things like the requirement for children to wear seatbelts. The completely arbitrary deadline of the end of this year is just there to appease the hardcore Brexitists who are now saying Brexit won't have happened until we intentionally destroy legislative alignment with the EU. So scared are they of the shift in the will of the people towards rejoining the EU. If this bill goes ahead, not only would it cause chaos in the economy, but it's going to cost tens of millions of pounds at a time when millions of us are struggling with the cost of living and public services are crumbling. The concept of this bill came from the fevered brain of the haunted Victorian pencil Jacob Rees-Mogg, arch-Brexitist in chief. Naomi Smith, chief executive of Best for Britain, said, "In reality, this bill is a bonfire of rights that could overnight remove the kind of protections that we all take for granted, from paid annual leave to food standards. Despite being fully aware of the chaos that this bill could unleash, Sunak is too weak to scrap it. Nobody voted for Sunak, and nobody voted for this. It doesn't matter what lengths the government go to try to appease the swivel-eyed Brexitist wing of their party, they just get pushed further and further down the road towards complete economic and civil catastrophe.